Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're learning Masechtas Nazir daf Ches. We are up to the Mishnah on Ches Amud Aleph. Says the Masnisin, Hareini Nazir, if a person makes the following declaration, that I'm going to be a Nazir, Kisar Roshi, like the hairs that are on my head, I'm assuming it's not a bald guy, Uka'afra Aretz, or like the earth that's on the ground, picking up massive clods of earth, is almost an infinite amount. Ukachol hayam, or like the sand in the sea. So harizen nazir olam. So the din is that this person takes upon himself the din is a nazir olam. Umaglech achas lo'shoshim yoyim. However, basically he is having thousands and thousands of 30-day nazirus, and therefore every 30 days he completes a nazirus, and then he immediately starts over again. Says the Mefarish, "V'harizen nazir oil afish sa'aros rosh marubin mishnei chayav." Since the hairs in his head are more than the years of his life, he megalech kol yamav. He will end up shaving all of his days. Achas b'soif shloishim v'yavi carbon. Every 30 days he brings a carbon. So therefore, it's not one very long nazirus, but rather it is 30-day nazirus forever. However, Rabbi Yomi, he disagrees and says, this is not a situation where this person would be cutting his hair every 30 days. It's not many short nazirus, but rather it's one long nazirus. So what would be an example of him actually having numerous 30-day short nazirus, which he would cut his hair each 30 days, bring a carbon? Nazirus. So if you would say Nazirus, not really Nazir, Nazirus, which is Loshen Rabim, that implies that he wishes to accept upon himself numerous levels of being a Nazir. So that's the difference. Okay, so the Mishnah then says, Hareini Nazir, Moli Habayas, or Moli Hakupa. Person says, I'm going to be a Nazir for the amount that it takes to fill up a house or fill up a basket. So we evaluate this. Im omer achas kedayla nazarti nazil yom echad. So if in fact he said this statement like it's one nazirus, it'll actually be for 30 days. Says Mefarish of Sulo, but not more than that, just 30 days. V'hadi omer moli habayis. So when I say filling up a house, which is much more than 30, he's saying that Nazirus is something which is very difficult to me. It's a great tircha, just like one filling up an entire house. But he really is only limiting himself for that short amount of time. But he's just saying that the tircha is great. V'im omer stam nazarti. Let's say he just says it plainly. So Rowan as a kupakil he malei chardal. We envision a basket which needs to be filled up with tiny mustard seeds, v'nazir kol yamav, and therefore he will end up being a nazir all of his days. So Tosis, the Gemara is going to end up asking, l'chayra, why are we saying mustard seeds which are small? Why don't you say filled up with something bigger? Okay, the Gemara is going to ask that question. Hareini nazir mikan v'ad makam ploni. So we had this Mishnah before. A person says, I'm going to be Nazir from here until Cincinnati. Omdin kami yomim mekan ad makom ploni. We figure out how many days does it take to get there. If it's less than 30 days, then if that's how long the journey is, less than 30 days, then nowadays with airplanes, everything is less than 30 days. So you'd be a Nazir for 30 days. But the imlav, let's say it would take more than 30 days, so it would take 60 days, 80 days. So Nazir Kiminyan Hayomim. So you're Nazir for that amount of time. And as we said before, the reason is because he was Hichsak B'derech. He's actually on the road. And therefore, because he's nervous of Sakanas Nefashis, that listim or people may come and harm him, so therefore he made this declaration on the road, and therefore it's Mustam. It's logical that probably what he meant is as long as I'm still on the road, I want to be a Nazir. So therefore we will evaluate if it's going to be more than a 30-day period of time, so then will be a Nazir for a longer period of time than the 30 days. Already Nazir Kiminyan Bosachama, person says, I wish to be a Nazir like the days of the sun, namely a solar year of 365 days, so Mona Nazirus Kamin Yimosachama. We will do that, and we will evaluate his Nazirus like Yimosachama. In other words, he will have 30-day Nazirus 365 times. So he'll end up being a Nazir basically for 30 years straight. So Omer Rabbi Yehuda Masa Haya Kivan Shehishlim Mace. It's a pretty sad story that this guy was finally waiting for the one moment after his Nazirus is going to end, and after this 365 times 30 months. Actually, am I calculating this correctly? 365, which is 1 year, times 30. Yeah, it's for 30 years. So, and then the guy ended up dying. Says Taisus, Rabbi Yehuda l'sayil l'tanakama kasi. He's not arguing, he's just supporting him. Basically he's saying, it's just saying that this actually happened. So it's a Masa Shahaya. And we see that it was actually for such a long time he was a Nazir that he ended up dying. Okay, says the Gemara. He didn't die because he was a Nazir, but it just shows that he lived a very long life, and he was a Nazir basically for a long amount of those years. So says the Gemara. So Ryan is a kupakil malei. So he said that if a person makes a statement that I'm stam nazarti, so he wasn't very explicit. So we envision that basket should be filled with mustard seeds, and he's basically going to be a Nazir his entire life, which means we go extremely, extremely strict and say that he's a Nazir forever, because mustard seeds are very small. It'll take a very long time to fill that up. So for the Gemara, but Nazir kol yama v'amai v'lixik ilu malei kishun v'deluyin. Why don't we envision instead it's filled with cucumbers or gourds? And it's interesting, we see very often in Shas, like we saw this in Masechta Shabbos, that it contrasts chardal, which is apparently something very small, to kishun v'duluyim. We saw this whether eged b'kli shmei eged, more in Shabbos. Anyway, v'tahavi le tekanto, so then their tak is a tekana. It's possible that this guy is not going to have to be a Nazir for his whole life. So on this, says Taisus, the truth is, making it was filled with doughs. Basically just saying, why aren't we makel? We know elsewhere that stam nazirus l'hakel. So then why over here are we being so strict? So the Gemara says like this: Rav Shimon here. It's totally on this machlokas, and it's Rav Shimon. The Omer Adam machnas es atzmo l'davar shesveiku chomer mevadai. A person would put themselves into a matter in which even the suffix is going to be more chomer than vadai. So what does that mean? So the Mefarsh explains the ilu nazir vadai. If you're 100% a nazir, so we know that there is an end game. Megaleach vehet maybe karma nechel. You'll eventually be able to bring a carbon, and then the end of it. The ilu al sveiko lomas megaleach to have a mefarish be'ilu mutar mesechnas nedarim. As we saw before, in the case where you're in doubt, you can't bring a carbon. So therefore, the truth is a suffix is worse or more chomer than a vadai. The question is, would a person put themselves into a suffix even when it comes to a situation where the suffix is much more serious than the vadai? The sanya. Hareini nazir al manashehi bekrizem me'akur. So a person says, I'm going to be a nazir on condition this pile has 100 measures of grain. V'haloch, so he went. Umatzan, so he wanted to be able to see if in fact there's 100 kur of grain in there. And umatzah shenigna b'sha'avad. It turns out that the grain is gone. It was stolen or lost. Rav Shimon oiser. Rav Shimon says that this guy is aser. Notice he becomes the neder schal. Just suffix nazirus lahachmir, because he actually holds that we go strict when it comes to nazirus. Yehuda matir is just suffix nazirus lahakel. So let's look at this Taisus. Ve'ein anu yodeim. We don't know. Im hayuba me'akorim lav. We'll never know if in fact there was 100 kor in this pile. So Shimon Oyser, the suffix nazirus lahachmir. He goes strict. What if there was 100 kor? And therefore he really would be a nazir. So therefore he's strict. Later on I'm going to explain a remedy. that if before he began to count his days of Nazirus, im hoyubo mea kor, if there was 100 kor, v'hareini Nazir midibur harishain, hini ashlim nidre maybe karbonoisav. So you'd be able to bring his carbon. V'im lo hayubo mea kor, if there wasn't 100 kor, v'im kain b'dibur lo hayubo mamish. Hareini noider Nazir b'Nazir ma'achshav v'hayanazir shloishim v'yabi karbonoisav. Continuing Taisus, v'im timer ma'isveka chomer mavadai, v'yesh loimer diyachol of alidei chumra. So this is going to be question number 1 over here. Ma chomer sheish b'sveka mavadai. What's the stringency of a suffix over a vadai? V'ika tekantu Rav Shimon b'tanai. You could, as we just said, Rav Shimon holds you can make a condition. Umamanav shach nifter b'naziris achas, and maybe you could be potter completely. So again, you can again make this condition. You can say, if in fact there was 100 kor, then I'm a nazir, right? And I'll finish up my nazir, so I'm bringing carbon. But if it's not 100 kor, then my words meant nothing, and I'll be make a neder as a nazir now, and I'll be a nazir for 30 days. It's basically, there's a way out of making this condition, mamanoshach, that you could really get out of being a nazir, according to him. There could still be a chumrah here. If let's say you became tummy before you made this condition, now we have a problem that you're a suffix nazir tummy. The ein lo takana. In this situation, there's no remedy. You're not able to bring a carbon at this point anymore. Because it's a suffix. Because you could technically be bringing something which is not a carbon into the base of Mikdash. The Shem and Nazirhu, then Yachal Lifter Miziruso, Imlo, Bahavos Ashim Tuma. The Ein Vize, Ein Bo Al Hatanai. But it's true, if you became tummy after the condition, Oz have a Vadi Nazir Tame, you're definitely a Tame. Umaisi Ashim Tuma, Vahadim Ashim Naziruso. So, if you became Tame after you made that condition, so it's really not a problem. You can bring a carbon because you're Mamanashach, you're a Nazir. The question is, if it was before you made this condition, we're not sure if you're going to actually be a Nazir. And therefore, because of that, suffix Nazir Tameh, there's really no takana in that situation. Okay. So one answer to our question is, why we go strict, is because it's according to the opinion of Rav Shimon. That actually holds suffix Nazirus as a hachmir. Rabbi Yochanan Rafil Tem Rabbi Huda could actually even be like Rabbi Huda, that normally he says suffix Nazirus al hakel. So then, how come if normally he's lenient? So then, whether or not this guy is a Nazir, right? So he says no, he's not a Nazir because we're lenient in this case. So how come in our situation, where you made yourself a Nazir, and there's a question is how long you're going to be a Nazir, why are we so strict to say it has to do with the amount of mustard seeds? I thought he's Makel. So I feel Rabbi Yehuda Hassam over there in the Brisa, lo nachasle lo Nazirus. In other words, the Nazirus may not have been chal. The whole suffix is, are you a Nazir? You may not even be a Nazir at all. B'hachabar Mishnah nachasle Nazirus, b'maylis saluki minei. There's no question that you are a Nazir. There's no shaila about that. The whole question is, how long are you a Nazir? So therefore, you're already now a Nazir, and now the question is, how do you remove that Nazirus? So then we have to be strict. If you're never a Nazir, so maybe we could be lenient. So that's the explanation, which is TA 13. Hareini Nazir tam mali kupa. So Amadul Amrin and Ki'ulu Mali Kishuin. So question 13, either because we're holding Rav Shimon the Machnas Adam was Safek Nazirus, we are strict, the person would actually put himself into a doubt, or possibly everyone holds like this. Kivan the Chad Nazirus Kabbaleh, he definitely accepted upon himself Nazirus. So Vadi Nazir, Vanidain Rakan Matai. We just want to know when. Umasafik in Yachal Stalik, and therefore for a Safik he can't remove the Nazirus. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. So amai lo lichse lo kupa ki lo moli kashum v'deluyim. So the Gemara says, so why don't we envision again that it's filled with these larger foods like cucumbers and gourds? And there's a takana. So in other words, what exactly was this hava mean over here? So so we originally thought that Nazirus, he certainly was makabel upon himself. As we continue to Chesed Beis, Rabbi Yehuda Savar ki Rabbi, and he holds like the opinion of Rabbi. Who's that? Did not. Rabbi Omer ein ze megalech achas shoshim yoyim. So going back, where is this from? This is from our Mishnah. He says that we don't find that there's separate 30-day Nazirus, but rather it is one very long Nazirus. What is in a situation where you have multiple 30-day Nazirus? If a person says, Hareo lai Nazirus. So he makes, since he said Nazirus blushing around him, so he's accepting himself numerous ones. Hold off on that for a second. Says the Mefarish, the Omer Masnisin Kiyama Harei Nazir Kisar Raishi Ein Zemegleach Achas Yoyim. That's considered like one long day, one long Nazirus. Mishum Nazirus Arichta Kabel Layu. Oilam Ein Lo Takana. So there's no Takana Shahari Cyrus Raisha Marubin Mishtechayim. As we said, there's more hair in your head than many years. Hachinami Harei Nazir Moli Hakupa. When you accept upon yourself the amount of stick into a basket, Nazirus Arichta Kabel, you're still doing the same thing, like our Mishnah. Maybe carbon. Therefore, you can't bring it after every 30 days. Because it's considered to be like one long Nazirus. Is it really true that he holds like Rabbi? But Tanan, Hareini Nazir, Kiminyan Mosachama, V'chu. So the Seifa of our Mishnah said that if you have making yourself into a Nazir like Yimosachama, so we had this opinion, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was a story. So Rabbi Yehuda so the guy died. Now if you want to tell me that he accepted multiple 30-day Nazirus, that's why it says that after he finished it, he died. There was just one. So it's never, there's no hashlama. It can never end. V'od. Does he really hold it? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hareini Nazir Minyan hayalikti kayetz. A person says, I'm a Nazir for the amount of ilikti kayetz. Says Taisus, Alma Nazirus Harbi Kabbalel, Rabbi Yehuda. He's accepting many Nazirus. Okay. Uminyan Shivle Shmita. And like the stalks of the Shemitah. Minor Nazirus, so he said he counts Nazirus, separate Nazirus. Kiminyan, but if he says Kiminyan Heliti Kayat, so Kiminyan Shivle Shemitah. So the Gemara says, Minyan Shiny. What does that mean? It says Taisus. Perish. Vada ki yomer minyan Nazirus. Once you say the word minyan, kibula, then you're accepting numerous Nazirus. Ki yomer kechardo kelikti lo hisker minyan. You don't say the word minyan. Chad Nazirus orach kabbalah karebi. Then it's like one long Nazirus. So if you say kiminyan, so then each one is like 30 days, and it's for a long time. However, if you don't say the word minyan, then it's one long Nazirus. Umi shani le Rabbi minyan. Does he really make a distinction? Says Taisus. Hayisaver kivan Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi savar la savale mishani le bain amar minyan bain lo amar minyan hachanam mishani le Rabbi. Is it true he makes a distinction? Mosanya Hareini Nazir kim minyan mosachama. So he said, and you say the word minyan, so that should mean they're all separate Nazirus. So moina Nazirus kim minyan mosachama. If you say kiyamei halavana, moina kiyamei halavana. So that's one opinion, but we have a machlokus. Rabbi Omer ad shiyerman Nazirus olai kiminyan mosachama kiminyan mosach halavana. So we see that the fact that you say minyan, according to him, is not enough. You actually have to say Hari. You have to say Nazir Salai Kiminyan. So Rabbi Yehuda Sevel Kavasi B'chado Pagla B'chado. So as we find many times, so he argues in one place, but he agrees with the other. So if you look at the Mefarish, when it says Kiminyan Hayilchte Kai, it's like the paths. Kiminyan Shavilim Sha'oisim Kaitzi Te'enim, those who cut dates. Ben Hakaitzos Kadesha Himahalchin Ben at times so you can pass between the paths. Avlohayu Nidrachim B'regel, because you're not supposed to step on them with your feet. Kimin Shivli Shmita, Shtebashnasa Shmita in a Sados Nizrois. During that time, people don't plant on Shmita. Umnichin Bohen Shivolim. And there's like bundles that are there. Okay. So he says, again, he agrees with him regarding one aspect, and then he disagrees regarding the other. Savrla Kavase B'chada. How does he agree? Nazirus Kabbalah. They accepted upon himself multiple Nazirus. The question is, does he make a distinction? If you say the word Maina or not, is that what's necessary? But they all agree that really you're accepting upon yourself multiple Nazirus. Tanaban. Hareni Nazir Koyme Chaye. Hareni Nazir Oilam. Harizen Nazir Oilam Afil Mea Shana. Even 100 years. I feel El Shana 1,000. Ein Zen Nazir Oilam El Nazir Oilam. Tanaban. Hareni Nazir Ve'achas. What if you say you're a Nazir and you say and one? So minus time. So that counts for 2. If then you also add Ve'od, then minus shalosh. So it becomes 3. If you then say another word, V'shuv, then moina arba. So pshita, obviously the fact that you're being moisiv devar, you keep adding, l'chor, that should be proof that each one is a nazirus by itself. So madateim of a shuv kikul v'havalei shis kamashmon deloy. So you would think, this is question 2. Harini nazir v'achas moina shtayim v'oid moina shalosh v'shuv moina arba pshita ma'kamashmon. You would think maybe the word shuv is saying not just to tack on one more, but you're basically doubling whatever it was. So from going from 3, you would think that you would end up having to go to 6. So no, it just means you're only adding 1. That's all it's coming to include. Okay. Finishing up the parak. Tanoban Hareini Nazir. The person is a Nazir. Sumcha Saimer Hain Achas Digoin Shtayim. So again, if you say this, it's 1. But if you say digoin, that is shtayim. That's considered like 2. Says Taisus, says digoin shtayim beloshin yavan. It's a language in Greece. Tarigoin, because the word like tray, which is 3 shalosh. Tatragin is arba. Puntigoin sounds like a pentagon. It's 5. Chamesh. Tanaban. Bias egul. We have a house that is round, which has to do with Tumas Negoyim. So Digoin, if it's Digoin, has 2 corners. Terigoin, if it has 3 corners. Puntigoin, if it has 5. Enamatame Menegoyim. So the din is that it's not going to be Tame Negoyim. Rather, it has to be tatrigoin. It has to have a 4-cornered house. My time will lamatahu oimer kir kiros. Lamahu oimer kir kiros harikan arba. It says wall, corner, wall. It says it twice, so therefore it means 2 and 2. 2 and 2 is 4. So therefore, question. Question 14, TB 14. Bayashesh lo sholosh o chamesh zavius imatam negoyim, 3 or 5. The answer is no and no. It has to be, because of exersa kosev, it has to have 4 corners, and that's it. Hanula kol kinoi, hanula kol kinoi, hanula kol kinoi. We're now going to be continuing in tomorrow's daf. The new parak on Daf Tes, Hareini Nazir, Min Agrogris, Min Hadveil, Adka.